the poverty certainly makes it easier for the political class to manipulate us, because at the end of the day, everybody wants a good life, you know. And if your way into that is via tribal politics, they're just mirroring the political class. This is a problem of the political class. It's not a Gen Z problem. No one wants us to see Ruto gone more than us. We want to see Ruto gone too, right? But we can't rush that process, because we are looking for answers to deeper questions. That the Kenyan government's primary constituency is not the Kenyan people. It's not the people who are sitting at home and voting. It's the people who finance the government. Those are the people who determine what the policies of the government actually look like. And if you are Kenyan sitting here in the diaspora, there are people who are doing their work on the street, but if you're here in the diaspora, you have a very important role to play.
The 2026 annual conference of the Kenyan Nurses Association of America, KNAA, is happening in Baltimore from September 17th through the 19th at the Sheraton Baltimore North Hotel in Towson, Maryland. Early registration is now open at $250 until July 1st. After that, it goes up to $300. Vendor and sponsorship opportunities are also available, but space is limited. Registration details are on your screen, and the links are pinned in the comments and description below. For inquiries, call 848-224-1201 or email info@kenyannursesUSA.org. That's info@kenyannursesUSA.org. You know, like to maybe shift this conversation a bit into, you know, like what's, you know, like actually happening on the ground, because one of the things that we're trying to get away is from tribal politics.
Yes.
And this, you know, like the blind loyalty that people
Yes.
have. Now, when you go to, you know, like spaces where Gen Zs are actually, you know, like casting their votes, which is universities in Kenya, and there's a pattern, you know, like that's appearing there, that the tribal voting is happening in college campuses. And of course, you know, in college campuses, these are the people who eventually can become MCAs, they become members of parliament, and some of them even rise all the way to wanting to vie for presidency. So the college campuses have had that history,
Yeah.
you know, like for a very long time. But there was a forum where it was Gen Zs who were talking, I believe it was in MTV, and they were the ones who were actually bringing this up. They were saying that, you know, like they had thought that with the movement, that the first place where they're going to start seeing changes is these elections in college campuses, but it's not happening. And now here is my own personal theory, you know, like just viewing things from the outside and not looking to blame this group or that group. In the spirit of the World Cup, there's soccer that's happening, a lot of soccer that's happening right now. Now, when you look at different countries, for example, like Italy did not qualify for this World Cup, but the Italian team, they've, you know, since they were children, they've been taught to play the game with a defensive vision. It's defense first. The Brazilians have a vision where it's offense first. You would find defenders, you know, number 2, number 3 out there attacking and scoring goals. So this is a vision they grow up with. So this is a vision that a player who's been brought up in that system understands, and that's their first instinct. So my theory on tribal voting in Kenya, because every generation, you know, I wish to remind everyone else, even us guys, when we were, you know, like becoming adults, people were saying, these are the guys who are gonna end tribalism. But it never happened. You know, like the generation before us, you know, like these are the people who are gonna end tribalism. It never happened. And then, of course, now it's a Gen Zs that these are the people who are going to end tribalism. The jury is still out there. We don't know the results. But my theory is based on the fact that you see, like the way the Italians play with a defensive vision, you know, there may be some benefit in going on the offense. But because, you know, like kids are trained in this one system, that's the default system that they think about when they go out there. So I think now with Gen Z coming of age and now getting active into the voting stage, because there was no, you know, like set of values built over time to show them that these are the values that you need to look for when you're looking at a candidate. If you notice a country like Tanzania has had its issues, but then Tanzania actually has political parties that have systems, and the first thing that a Tanzanian thinks of when they are voting is not necessarily tribe. In fact, tribe, if you're in one of the largest tribes they've never produced a president. So my thing is, the reason why this tribal voting happens, it's not because people are inherently tribalist, but it's because of this vision that people have been brought up with, whereby when you're making a decision, this is what you've been accustomed to, and I think that's what's happening. So my question is, how do we start building these values? Because these values, they cannot even start to someone as an adult. They have to come from a much lower level. So here's my question: in how do we try to cultivate these values, because it's a process that's gonna take time, like you say.
First of all, I think it's helpful if we talk about every segment not as a monolith, right? There's going to be people who are using this moment as a currency to themselves get into the political class. There's always going to be charlatans, there's always going to be grifters, there's always going to be customers. Every movement is going to have that, right? And when I say we need to interrogate the history, you have to ask yourself, the movements that were pushing back of the governments of their day, why did they fail? And why should we be, what will make us different that we should succeed? What happened to the Kenya Land and Freedom Army? What happened to the trade unionists? What happened to the Kenyans? What happened to all of these people who are even born of these movements, who ended up joining the government? Why, as soon as they were there, everything changed and suddenly they're serving their own interests? These are questions you have to interrogate. And the people who are interested in true change are asking themselves those questions right now. Those are the conversations 625 is driving. It's what went wrong and how can we do it different? So the poverty certainly makes it easier for the political class to manipulate us, because at the end of the day, everybody wants a good life, And if your way into that is via tribal politics, they're just mirroring the political class. This is a problem of the political class. It's not a Gen Z problem. But if Gen Z is going to deliver, if this moment in time we're going to deliver an alternative, I think the focus of the conversation needs to be on the people who are actually interrogating those questions and trying to offer something that is a different vision. It has to be an economic vision, not a tribal vision, something that actually is addressing the issues of working people. Why are working people struggling in our country? When you look at that, you realize whether he's a Kikuyu or a Luo or this or that, they're part of one political class who actually has an agenda for working people. What does an agenda for working people look like? We have to look at the other examples in Africa, even in our region in East Africa, and look at what is even proximate to what we want that they're doing, and how do we build a structure that mirrors that. That is a process that cannot happen in 1 or 2 years. And I understand that people are no one wants us to see Ruto gone more than us. We want to see Ruto gone too, right? But we can't rush that process, because we are looking for answers to deeper questions, while everybody else who also says they want Ruto gone is sitting there saying, why hasn't Gen Z gotten this guy out? Why haven't they organized a political movement that can push him out? It's gonna take more than that.
Okay, right? So make me understand, and Joy, I also want you to jump into this conversation, but I want both of you to make me understand, now where that, forget about even Ruto must go.
Yeah.
Where is that process currently, of what needs to come in the future, and where exactly is this process connecting to the rest of Kenya?
Yeah.
People, the older crowd, to millennials, to Gen X, to even the boomers, where is it connecting? So that's where I want us to go, to understand where these conversations are happening, and maybe what are some of the small steps, not necessarily big wins, but what are some of the small wins that are expected, or small steps that are expected maybe within the next 1 year, because of course, like those big visions that we want to see maybe in 10 years, there has to be small steps that can be viewed at least within a year, within 2 years. So maybe brief us a little bit on that. Maybe Joy, you can get started on that, and then we'll go to Luca.
One of the main things we've been trying to focus on is what are the strengths of the diaspora. And I think one of the challenges with that is a lot of people here are focused on things that they really have little control over. They kind of ignore the things that they can actually do while they're here and focus on issues that maybe might be better for them to just support while they're here, right? And so while we were trying to build our committees in the 625 movement, we wanted to optimize for the most actionable items that people here have the most power to do.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the committees that we want is people who are working on engagement with the Hill. I think living here, being close to Congress, we need to start understanding how that whole system works. Countries who are organized, who have been able to understand how these lawmakers make decisions, make policies, take advantage of what the interests of the U.S. are and how they can align their interests with the U.S. for the betterment of people in Kenya. Those are the kind of conversations that we're trying to do with lobbying committee.
And that's a very important point, because just to push back to the Saba moment for a second, there was two things that forced the repeal of 2A. It was certainly the movements that were going on back home. But America's relationship with Kenya changed dramatically that year because of the fall of the Soviet Union. Their interests changed. And so when they're setting new conditions for new structural adjustment programs, for new loans for Kenya, they pushed Moi. They told Moi, we want to see democratic reforms. And that moment was born of that. You have to understand, when I talk about political education, it's understanding that the Kenyan government's primary constituency is not the Kenyan people. It's not the people who are sitting at home and voting. It's the people who finance the government. Those are the people who determine what the policies of the government actually look like. And if you are Kenyan sitting here in the diaspora, there are people who are doing their work on the street. But if you're here in the diaspora, you have a very important role to play, because these electeds, they listen. They listen if you live here, if you're a business owner, if you're organized, they listen. And they have a significant amount of say over the conditions that inform the financing for these loans. And I assure you, if a member of Congress who represents Middle River, where many Kenyans are living, if he says something, Ruto is going to be much more responsive to that than he is going to be to the people back home. So understanding how these political structures actually operate is really important, because you start to see where the levers. How did progress happen before, and how does that inform what we are aiming for as the levers of progress now?
Now,
and you have to remember, we're living in the age of the American Empire. They have a lot of power, and you are at the seat of the American Empire here. So what can you do with your access here? And that's one of our main...
Absolutely. If I could just make one real quick point. In the long term, we want sovereignty for Kenya. We want Kenya not to be beholden to structures outside of us. Like we just talked about, the finance bill was informed by decisions that had nothing to do with the working people of Kenya, right? In the long term, we want sovereignty. But your question was, what do we do in the short term? In the short term, we can use those levers to cleave open spaces that we can push for long-term progress.